could take their seats, please, and if we could close that door. Thank you. The chair will call to order the meeting of Community Unit School District 201 Board meeting today, Tuesday, October 23rd, 2012. Roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Ms. Caparelli?
Here.
Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Mrs. Hancock?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the August 23rd, 2012 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Okay. Any opposed? No? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 25th, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? No? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the September 25th, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the October 9th, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So
Marie, I just had one
I'm sorry.
comment on that one. Under Mr. Balderman's presentation, it says modified open campus as an incentive to those high school students that performed well on the PSAE assessment. Wasn't it for like all, the entire class?
Right.
Instead of, it makes it sound like it's just for those students.
And
At least that's the way I'm reading it.
And for seniors. For
Seniors, right.
Right. Not for all students.
Right.
But seniors.
Anything
If we
else?
want to change that
Okay.
incentive, modified open campus as an incentive to all high school seniors? And then something like if the class performed well on the,
Okay. Anything else? Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the October 9th, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as amended.
So moved.
second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the October 9th, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, we're going to go out of order just for a quick, we're going to have the public hearing first and then public comment because Ms. Anderson has her equipment set up. So this is the public hearing on the 2012-2013 budget. The chair calls to order the public hearing on the 2012-2013 budget. The chair will ask Ms. Anderson, the business manager, to provide any updates to the 2012-2013 budget.
Okay, good evening. We've got the 2012-13 final budget for you this evening. And first, we're going to start out with revenues by source. As you know, the majority of our revenues come from property taxes. And I've done a comparison of all funds versus operating funds. And the operating funds for this purpose are the education, transportation, IMRF, Social Security, and tort funds, and operations and maintenance. And so you can see that our property taxes, again, are the greatest percentage of our income, with relatively small amounts of revenue coming from local sources, which include student fees, corporate personal property replacement taxes, and then we have state sources and federal sources. So total operating fund revenue of about $24.4 million, and in all funds, total revenue of about $25.6 million. And then I am presenting our operating funds pictorially, so you can see again, property taxes are about 81% of our revenue. And then all funds, they make up a little bit over 82%. Some of the revenue assumptions that the budget's based on is a CPI of 1.5% for the 2011 levy and 3% for the 2012 levy. Again, interest rates are at historic lows. When we present our investments, we're earning basically 0.01, 0.02% on any monies that we have in reserve right now. This budget has a decrease in general state aid as a result of the state proration. Last year, they prorated GSA at 95%. This year, they prorated it at 89%. We are also seeing some decreases in our state revenue. Our early childhood grant decreased by about $8,000 this year. We have a decrease in corporate personal property replacement taxes. But we are going to see an influx. We issued $5 million of working cash bonds for capital projects in July. And those we've been using for the renovations that have been happening at Manning, Miller, and South, the new windows at the high school, and Wi-Fi at both the junior high and high school. Expenditures by object, again, a comparison of all funds versus the operating funds. And you can see that salaries and benefits, again, are the greatest sources of expenditures for the district, with salaries in the operating funds comprising a little over 58% and benefits at about 13%, for a total of a little bit over 70%. Purchase services are 11%, and supplies and materials are right around 7%. And then we also have tuition for outplaced students, and that is almost 9% of our operating budget. So total operating fund expenditures, $24.7 million, and in all funds, $31.2. And again, just so you can see visually what portion of the pie salaries and benefits consume versus the other expenditure categories. And then the expenditures by object for all funds. I have a fund balance summary for you, and you'll see that right now we're projecting an operating deficit of about $301,000. And we are showing the influx of revenue in the working cash fund of $5 million for the issuance of bonds. And right now we're anticipating spending that $5 million this year. It may not be that much, but we have it earmarked in case we do have projects that consume the whole $5 million. The expenditure assumptions, salaries, the WTA salaries are based on STEP. The contract is still being negotiated. WESPA salaries are no increase is projected in the budget, and that's to align with all other employee groups that have taken a one-year salary freeze. That contract is still being negotiated. The WCMA is 2% per their contract. Administrative salaries will be finalized when the WTA contract settles, and all other employees had an average of a 2% increase. Medical insurance benefits are budgeted at the known 0.65% increase for part of this year, and then an anticipated 10% for the remainder of the year. And the Operations and Maintenance Fund includes all anticipated increases for utilities. Transportation Fund has the 3.6% contractual increase with our new vendor and the cost of an additional route. And then again, the Capital Projects Fund includes the renovations that we've done for the classrooms and library at Manning and Miller, the windows and boiler at the high school, renovations at South, and Wi-Fi at the high school and junior high, as well as anticipated costs for summer 2013. Things to consider, revenue projections are conservative. Again, the state is running, 6 months behind. We continue to see decreases in CPPRT. Expenditures are based on anticipated needs and exceed current revenues in the operating funds. And the 2012-13 budget is aligned with board and district goals to provide educational services to the students and families we serve. Does anyone have any questions?
You ran the 2012 levy at 3%. What CPI you running so far this year?
We know what
That's
the
from last
2012.
month, that's 2011.
Yeah, we know that levy right now. And we've modeled both 2 and 2.5 for the next year. I have meetings with the assessors tomorrow, so we'll have a much better idea of where we see AAB going. And CPI has been running, it's projected between 2 and 2.5% right now.
This year?
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
So the chair will ask the board members if they have any other questions or comments on the 2012-2013 budget.
Just a comment. Thank you. I like all the pictorials and the way this was put together.
And this will be posted on the website, and we're also, as part of our strategic plan, some of our goals, we'll have those kind of charts on the website too, in the finance section, so people can see how the money's spent and where the revenues are coming.
Do you want to stay there for a minute, Kim? The chair will ask if there are any public comments on the 2012-2013 budget. Okay. Then the chair will declare the public hearing closed on the 2012-2013 budget. Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Okay, so the next item then on the agenda, public comment, and we will start with District Curriculum Advisory Council presentation by Amy Quattrone and Laura Riley, please.
Where's your internet? Oh, here, I'll go with this. Okay, so I just need the district site.
You go into, go to the web.
Yeah, where's it? Browser's already always set up. Sorry.
We couldn't just see USB 201.
Let's try that, yeah. Oh, perfect, okay. My browser automatically opens it, that's why I wasn't sure. Okay. There we go. Okay, you want to switch sides for right now?
Good evening, Amy Quattrone, Assistant Principal at Westmont Junior High, and Laura Riley, 6th grade science teacher at Westmont Junior High. Thank you very much for affording Laura and I the opportunity to let you know about our newly reformed CUSD 201 Curriculum Advisory Council, also known as the CAC. The CAC is a 2-year district committee dedicated to reviewing and reestablishing our current district curriculum processes. Spearheaded by myself in conjunction with Laura, our group currently consists of 16 teachers and administrators who will meet 4 times throughout the school year during the day to help accomplish this task. This is a 2-year rotating commitment for our teachers, so our work is consistent with our district's vision and strategic plan. At this point in time, our members include Kelly Boss, Jennifer Burasek, Kevin Carey, Carrie Frank, Catherine Gordon, Deb Hinman, Lisa Hootman, Becky Jones, Kristen Krestel, Carrie Leiston, Jamie Mahmood, Jane Most, Tanya Pechnick, and Michelle Therese. In an effort to run our committee much like our schools and classrooms, we designed our goals around the essential question of how can the CAC support the development of curriculum in District 201? From this essential question, we created the exit outcome to increase student achievement through a well-developed curriculum that accurately reflects our district's vision and strategic plan, which we believe we will fully meet by the end of the 2013-2014 school year. All of our sub-goals, planning, and activities that we engage in during our meetings will then fall underneath our essential question and will help us to eventually hit our exit outcomes. Our most important efforts to date include the work we generated at our last meeting a few weeks ago. At this meeting, we broke off into 3 groups: the curriculum process and development group, the lesson plan and unit template group, and the professional development group.
So the curriculum process and development group is helping to revamp our curriculum process for the entire district. We're focusing on questions such as, when will teachers' curriculum map? How will they map? Who will lead it? What will we do with the maps when we're finished with them? And how and when will we create exit outcomes for each grade level? This group will also ensure that our curriculum work aligns with our district vision. They will also work toward creating a scope and sequence alignment and exit outcomes, PK-12. The lesson plan and unit template group is working tenaciously to create differentiated PK-12 lesson plan, unit, and curriculum mapping templates to be used by teachers across the district. We will soon ask select teachers to pilot the templates and report back to our group. Understanding that our curriculum should be fluid and not driven by the textbook, the group will work with teachers to create these templates. And finally, the professional development group is working hard to find growth opportunities for staff across the district. They have begun by creating a survey to assess the individual needs of our staff, which will be rolled out to teachers via SurveyMonkey. After gathering the data, they'll use the information to determine the track of future development opportunities at CUSD 201. This group will also explore ways to develop our staff within the district, research other schools to visit who are aligned with our vision, and encourage staff to join professional organizations. If you're interested in following the most up-to-date information from our CAC, I've created a district blog to post the minutes from each of our meetings. I encourage you to sign up to receive the latest to receive the instant updates and the latest updates. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other public comments? All right, moving along to the consent agenda. We are pulling out item number 5. All the information isn't available yet. So are there questions on any of the other items?
I had just a couple of questions on 2 of the policies.
Okay.
The first policy was 7220, bus conduct. So just a very general question. Who's responsible for the children when the children are on the bus? Are they the district's responsibility or the bus company's responsibility? Okay. And then how are incidents reported to the district? In other words, is it the bus driver or is it if the kids come home and they have an issue on the bus, do they come back and tell their parents, and the parents call? What is the reporting, I guess, hierarchy?
Well, it can happen in a number of ways. One is the bus driver could witness an incident in which they report that to the building administration. It could be something occurs and either a student goes home, communicates to their parent, then their parent will contact the building, or in some cases, when the students arrive at school, they may report an incident. So it could happen one of those ways.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was on 530, hiring process and criteria. It doesn't state in here the employee physical, and when, is that part of the hiring process? In other words, is hiring contingent on an employee not having tuberculosis? Something
Yes.
along those lines. So there is a certain amount of time that they have to comply with this prior to?
Correct.
Okay. It doesn't say that in the policy, and I thought it left it just a little bit unclear, that there's no sort of timeline, but if it's part and parcel of the whole.
Of the whole process.
Okay.
Was
That's
that
it for me. That's,
Anyone else have any questions? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. Number 1, personnel recommendations. Number 2, approval of student tour. Number 3, policy first reading. Number 4, approval of consortium for educational change membership. Number 6, approval of AFR shared services or outsourcing requirement report. 7, resolution to abate working cash funds. 8, approval of October 2012 expenditure report. And 9, ratification of September 2012 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is action item. Adoption of 2012-2013 budget. The chair will entertain a motion. Whereas the Board of Education of Community Unit School District Number 201, County of DuPage, State of Illinois, caused to be prepared in tentative form a budget, and the secretary of this board has made the same conveniently available to public inspection for at least 30 days prior to final action thereon. And whereas a public hearing was held as to such budget on the 23rd day of October 2012, notice of said hearing was given at least 30 days prior thereto as required by law, and all other legal requirements have been complied with. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of said district as follows. Section 1, that the fiscal year of this school district be, and the same hereby is fixed and declared to be beginning July 1st, 2012, and ending June 30th, 2013. Section 2, that the following budget containing an estimate of amounts available in each fund separately and of expenditures from each be, and the same is hereby adopted as the budget of this school district for the said fiscal year. It was a motion.
So moved.
All that. Okay, roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the presentation of monthly financial statements for October 2012.
Okay, in your packet is the summary of the student activity accounts, fund balance report. We also have the lunch report this year, and unfortunately, we continue to experience the case where our expenditures exceed our revenues in our lunch program, and that's something that we're going to have to, start to seriously look at. Again, I think, not as many kids are purchasing lunch, and some of the new healthy eating requirements that just came into effect for the school year are also impacting revenues as well. So I'm not sure. I know there are a lot of school districts kids are complaining that they're hungry and things like that. I don't know if that will change any of the legislation regarding school meals, but that's definitely something that we're going to have to start focusing on in the district, and what we can do to increase lunch sales.
Kim, can I ask a question on that? Your comment that the students are not choosing to purchase, do we, and this might be a bigger question, do we have a certain amount that we have to prepare each day? Because the kids can decide almost on a daily basis, right? Whether they,
Right, and they have a pretty good idea of trend. I mean, Francesca's been doing this long enough that she has a pretty good idea of what students eat and how much. And then you also have, lunch orders ahead of time at the elementary, so because all that's sent over, so.
Yeah, and just as from a parent, like, I know my student, my son looks at the menu, so we determine. So is, and I know with the whole issue of the students are saying they're hungry and the help, is any of this that we're over anticipating? I mean, is there a lot of food left over, or is it just, I mean, you might not know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have not asked Fran that question at the elementary. And I haven't done my lunch reviews yet to see what they're doing.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. And then the investments are there for your review. Right now, we've got $14.2 million invested, and again, interest rates range anywhere from 0.5% down to 0.06%, which is considerably different than the interest rate environment of a few years ago. And then in terms of just revenues, again. The district did receive the majority of the outstanding categorical payments during the month of September. The state still owes the district $16,000 for fiscal year 2012, and now they owe the district $297,000 for fiscal 13 categorical payments. We did receive 2 installments of the 2011 tax levy in September, which was about $8.5 million. And so total taxes collected through the end of September are $19.4 million, which is a 93% collection rate, which is comparable to prior years. Again, in the Ed Fund, we're still waiting on $16,000 of payments from last year and $192,000 from this year. And in the Transportation Fund, we did receive all of the FY12 transportation revenue this month, but we're waiting now on the first quarter of fiscal 13, which is about $105,000. And expenditures in the Ed and Tort funds are comparable to prior year. Operations and maintenance, there is a variance from prior years, and that's really a result of having done life safety projects in the prior year, so that's skewing the averages. And then in the transportation fund, we hadn't paid Westway Coach by September. We did get all those bills and have paid quite a few of the bills in October. So that's why that expense to date is so low. Does anyone have questions?
On fund balance summary, we know capital projects has seen expenditures of $3,028,000. Does that include the 438 transfer that was in the abatement thing?
No, that happens in October.
In October. So our total capital projects, 12-13 year to date, call it $3.5 million, just under $3.5 million of money spent, dispersed this year. Is that pretty much all of it for this past summer? Or are there still trailing?
It's close.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of the 5, we've spent 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 this past summer. The projects were like almost 3.8 million. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Are you done with that, Kim?
Yes.
Okay. Then the next item is extension to file annual financial report.
Yeah, we had a conversation at our finance committee at the last board meeting, and we had an adjustment that needs to be made, which is requiring us to file the extension.
Okay, and that's all, Kim?
Yep.
Okay, then the next item, Westmont High School student incentive. Mr. Balderman, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody's interested in information, if you want to hand out, please help yourself. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
If you don't mind, I'd like to, go just a quick overview? I'll make it quick. So, I think the information I'm going to present to you in this packet gives a little bit of a prelude to what we're going to talk about. This is the first few pages, the first 4 pages are simply a copy of the PowerPoint that we shared with the faculty and staff at our bi-monthly meeting. Every other Friday, pretty much, we meet with the whole school in the auditorium to talk about progress we're making on some goals. And I'm really excited about the work the staff, faculty, and students have been doing. We'll get to that in a minute. But we've made, if you look at the bottom of page 1, some really great progress with our academics, the attendance, students being on time to class, and very positive discipline. They're all excellent reports. I'll get to that in a moment. Our big, hairy, audacious goals are being pursued vigorously, and we're excited about that. We have some great faculty survey results that do speak to the idea of the possible off-campus. That survey was, I put it together with help of our leadership team at the high school, and then Rainey Kaplan, our associate leader at the building, put together it on SurveyMonkey and then distributed to the staff, and they were able to complete that anonymously, so there was no idea that, it was completely without any kind of, expectations from us. We wanted the most straightforward feedback from our faculty as possible, and we had the results contained in this packet, and it's really encouraging to me. We asked a series of 9 questions and gave them a chance to open-ended response. And one of the questions we asked was, how do you feel about if the students hit all those targets and goals about opening the campus up? And we said 1 day a week. And the faculty response was 34% said they strongly agreed with that idea, 39% agreed, 21% disagreed, and 5% strongly disagreed. And there were also a series of comments that raised some, legitimate concerns, and I'm very grateful for those. So just to go very quickly through this on page 2, and the reason why I'm presenting this information is, first of all, I'm very proud of what the faculty, staff, and students have done, but secondly, I think it goes to the issue of responsibility, and our students are just doing an excellent job there, and they're complying with what we expect of them. And also, it's a great atmosphere in the building between faculty, staff, and our students. So, as an example, if you look on the middle of page 2, 99% of the time our students are in class. And the nice thing is I had that sense, but when you put it in the data, it really is pretty powerful. We've had 574 unexcused tardies to class that are documented pretty carefully, but when you divide that by the number of days we've been in session and the number of periods and the number of students, on an average period, there's about 2 students who are tardy, and I think that's pretty phenomenal. So 99% plus of the students are on time each day, being responsible, getting to class, and that really speaks to the relationship between faculty and students. Daily attendance at 96%, and that includes students who are out for legitimate reasons, but that's a pretty good attendance rate. 99.4% of the time, students are going where they need to go. That means the other 0.6% of the time, students are either truant from class or whatever and making bad decisions. But this is, almost every single time students are in class where they're supposed to be, or they have an excuse for not being there that's legitimate. So we're really proud of that work, and we talked to them about making the most of your one chance at high school. And we talked, they know that I'm coming forward to the board tonight with something that they've requested, and we said it's something that has to be earned. It can't just be given, and we have truly high expectations. So on top of it, on the bottom of page 3, you see the discipline was just outstanding in the first quarter. I mean, really, 4 suspensions, and I really don't consider any of them were serious offenses, so I don't want to jinx us, but it was pretty incredible. And, one of them, 2 of the 4 were for a little scuffle between freshmen, unfortunate, but, they're teenagers, they're not always perfect. Another one was for a young woman who was tardy and didn't comply with the detention, so she went to the next level. So they're not really serious infractions, and we really have stressed the idea of being compassionate and caring for one another and being respectful. On page 4 at the top, every time we do these assemblies, we ask people to recognize each other. It's quite beautiful. Staff members recognize students. Students recognize their teachers. It's quite neat. So I know you'll have some concerns. I just want to share this survey with you for a minute. This was a survey, again, conducted by our association, anonymous feedback from our staff. The really neat thing, it's labeled page 1 of 18. It's the 5th page in your packet. I asked the staff, after 3 really long discussions about what a professional learning community is and the idea of being committed to learning for all, and you see the overwhelmingly strong response from our faculty being committed to that central idea of professional learning communities. The second one is we talked about SMART goals and measuring ourselves and holding ourselves accountable. And we talked about increasing the graduation rate. And we didn't just do that in 5 minutes. We had some real, intense discussion about that with some concerns that were expressed, but at the end of the day, 68.4% of the faculty strongly agreed and 31% agreed. On page 2 of 18, as it's numbered on the bottom, page 6 in your packet, we asked about the PSAA increase to 70% or higher, and once again, about 97% of the staff either agreed or strongly disagreed, with the one response saying they disagreed. And then at the bottom, this gets to our conversation today. If the class of 2014, the current junior stay on track for a graduation rate of 95% or higher, give maximum effort in preparation for PSAE, then would you support the idea of open campus? Now, there was not the same kind of unanimity and thought on this. 34% strongly agreed, 39% agreed, 21% disagreed, and 5% strongly disagreed. So there was a little dissension there. And I actually think that's healthy. There was some good, but most of the staff is open to the idea at least. And they know that, it has to go through many levels of conversation before we get there. But that was their initial first draft response. I didn't know until this morning what the exact results would have been. And as I said, it was done anonymously by our staff and conducted by our teacher association. So, but the majority of the staff seems to think we should at least consider this from our point of view. The other neat thing, there's a couple other neat survey items in here. I'm very proud of what our staff had to say about those things. The final page in the packet is the comment portion where people talked about what the advantages and disadvantages were, and you can read those on your own. I'm not going to read those out loud. Some express mainly a concern about the possibility of some safety issues, which is, of course, legitimate. And others will say that they think that if we're going to, expect our students to be responsible and respectful, that we should treat them, give them the opportunity to be so. So I guess, we originally proposed to the board 2 days. That's still an option. If maybe we start off with 1 day a week and see how it went in the fall of 2013, it's all contingent upon students hitting some really high benchmarks for performance. And I'm excited about that more than even this incentive. I think the incentive is the cherry on top. Our students, I think, are intrinsically motivated to do the best they can on these issues. And so I really would like us to, I'd like to entertain any questions and try to give some answers and start this discussion with the understanding that this may be the first of several before this would ever be even instituted. I understand that.
Just completely off the top, I noticed in one of the comments, a person said if we begin to open up the campus again. Well, did we have an open campus at one point in the past? Do we know?
At one point in time, there was open campus at Westmont, yes.
Okay.
At one time.
A while back.
And do we know sort of how it came to not be and what the concerns were? And, I mean, you know, just trying to not reinvent the wheel, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm going on some of the comments that parents and some of our faculty have made to me. And it was, at times, you know, a burden trying to keep track of students. I believe at that point in time that it was open most of the days in the week. I'm going to give the floor to somebody else because I was not here. Maybe somebody was here during that time. But it's not the first time we've had open campus. But open campus used to be a lot more common, and over the years, for liability reasons, I think people have closed it up. Though there are some local schools that still have it, but it's not, it's more the exception than it is the rule.
Jack, are we talking half hour for this lunch period, 45 minutes, an hour? And my second question would be, do parents also have to give their permission for the student to have this?
The parents would absolutely have to give their permission for this to happen, 100%. They'd have to sign a waiver, which I know has limitations, but we'd have to have parent consent to allow this to happen. So they would at least at some level, hypothetically, you know, share the liability.
Okay.
This is one thing that we are still going back and forward on. If we kept the existing schedule, the 25 minutes really, I think, is not feasible. So we've discussed two options. One is that seniors would have the opportunity in their schedule to have the entire fifth period off, which would be extended, and they would not be allowed to leave the campus for the whole time. This is something we could negotiate, but I'm going to present to you options at this point, and we haven't come to rest on any one, and that's why we're really in a collaborative process. It's a little messier, but the outcome truly has not been determined on some of these things. I think that's important because it's part of the dialogue we want to have first with the board, then with our faculty, then with parents and community and students. So I think the options are, if we keep the current schedule, which is very likely, then we would probably allow the students to take 2 portions of the fifth period and then be back on campus for the third that they would use to study or to use at their own discretion. Because the 25 minutes one day a week would not be enough to allow them to leave the campus and return safely. If we're just setting ourselves up for failure if we say 25 minutes. One of our faculty members did devise an alternative schedule that would keep the 7-period day, that would break the fifth period that's currently in 3 sections into 2 sections of almost 45, 50 minutes apiece, which would leave a little bit more time for lunch. The underclassmen could use that time for interventions, and then that would still allow, because one of the concerns is if many of the seniors elected to take the whole period and not take a class, it could hurt enrollment in some of our elective areas. One way around that is to offer a 0-hour physical education, and then that would open up their, their schedule during the day as an option for seniors only, perhaps. So to be honest with you, I mean, we're still working through that phase.
So would they have to sign in and out?
Well, yes. They would have to sign out and then sign back in. And the primary way of tracking them, and I have to say I'm very impressed with Joanne in our attendance office. I mean, she's a complete hawk when it comes to these things. And our teachers do a nice job too, no question. But if a student did not report, the way we'd monitor it is student was in 4th period. If they weren't there in 5th period, then we know immediately that this was a senior who missed 5th period and who had been there 4th period, then they would technically be truant. And one thing we've talked about is making sure if that was the case, the student who violated the rules would lose the privilege, depending on how serious the infraction, could lose the privilege for a quarter, a semester, or for the rest of the time they were at Westmont High School.
Are you done, Gary? So this is a collective privilege. This is based on how the entire senior class is doing, is that correct?
Yeah, the current, when they the performance during the junior year, their continued performance during senior year, yes. So collective, as a group, it would open the door to the privilege as it's being, talked about, and then it would be retained by individual behavior.
Okay. All right, so the senior who doesn't show up for fifth period, he loses the privilege, not everybody. It's not a collective
Exactly.
withdrawal, just a collective.
To open the door, it has to be a group effort, and we can talk about that and how that comes to be. I know there's some legitimate concerns about that. To make it happen, the whole class has to unite and hit some really high benchmarks. They're not going to do it alone. The faculty, staff, parents, community are going to support them in that. But to open the door to the privilege, it has to be a class effort, and then from that point forward, individuals would retain it or lose it based on their own behavior. So, and I think that's fair. Most of our students are extremely responsible. You see that from, and this is not something that just happened this quarter at Westmont High School. Most of the students are responsible. They go to class on time. They show up almost every day. They're passing all their classes. So as long as they, and I believe that the great majority of students will handle this privilege with responsibility, then they keep the privilege. The students who abuse it, and they'll know this, and they'll know we're serious about follow-through, will lose it, and depending on how serious the infraction. If they're late for 3 or 4 minutes, they may lose it for a week. If they come back and, I'm not saying it's never happened, if they come back intoxicated, they would lose it for the rest of the year. If they just are truant, they might lose it for a quarter. So it would, the consequent would fit the infraction.
So when you talk about being on track for the graduation rate.
Yes.
So clearly you won't know the graduation rate till the end of the year. So what parameters, make that up or are included in being on track?
I'll say again, Carol and Larissa in our guidance office are amazing. When Denise and I sat down with them, we sat down already with every single senior. We went name by name and tried to track where are the students at, who are the ones who are in danger, who's behind in credits. They literally, this is the power of being a small giant, they knew every single student and their progress, and it was really very impressive, I have to say. And so we know which students are on track for graduation, which ones are in need of, maybe some remediation, and we know down to the student. So with the class, that means, for instance, they're going to need to have at least 15 credits in all their required classes going into their senior year. Many of the students have an excess of that, but we'd have to have, 95% of the class or higher who would be in a position to graduate during their senior year. At least, we're going to shoot for higher than that, frankly, but that's the bare minimum. But that's a fairly high bar when you look at the long-term data. So that would be the way we would track it.
And so, as far as the PSAE goes, would this start at the beginning of the school year or after the scores come out, say around this time you would initiate this, or?
The way the scores are released, the students take the test in late April. We already have the ACT data trickling in by late May, so we have a pretty good indication. By late June, usually the state will give us, early July at the latest, the state would have us, would get the complete report. It's just not released to the media until November, but we've had the PSAE information since mid-summer. So it's a good point. We won't know for certain until early July if the reporting trends continue, maybe late June. But we'll know for certain by then. We'll have a very good indication by mid to late May. But part of this really is, and I know this is one of the concerns that people have raised, I think is a legitimate concern. All of these goals are within the student's reach. All it requires is that they give an excellent effort. There's no reason why a student should not be on track for graduation as long as they're doing the reasonable things. Our faculty and staff and the resources that this community and the board provide to our students pretty much guarantee if a student gives a fair effort, they're going to be on track for graduation. We have the interventions, we have the faculty, et cetera, to make that happen. So, and if a student is struggling, needs additional time and practice, we can find ways to make that happen. The same is true on the PSAE. It's not so, I'm confident if the students, give maximum effort in class, we want to have every student have some kind of prep for the ACT and the PSAE. If they all partake in that, the scores are going to fall where they are. I'm very confident that they'll be at a very significant level. So we'll know if the majority, if 95, 98% of the class gives an excellent effort, the scores will follow. So, and we're going to gauge that based on looking at plan, explore data, look at trend data. So it may be adjusted slightly from class to class, because what we're looking at is a growth model. Sometimes, one class may be a little bit more, strong in producing test score results than the next one. Then we'd make a slightly intelligent adjustment to those kind of needs. But we're really talking about, the three main things we've discussed. On track for graduation, primarily a result of giving a very reasonable effort, preparing in a meaningful way in class every day and with the additional prep sessions that we'll offer, and then the appropriate students taking a very rigorous schedule or an appropriate schedule for their senior year. That's all within their ability to achieve those goals. And it has to do with their effort, maybe not their individual strengths. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. The piece that I really like about this is that it is a collective incentive and not an individual, so you're not just looking at the individual student and rewarding that, but that there's an element here that focuses on that positive peer pressure that maybe we can capitalize on a little bit, student to student. And I guess I'd be interested in, as you move forward with it, hearing more about how that plays out in this experience. Because I think that's a real strong piece for a teenager.
Yes. I've already seen a little bit of it, but it is in a positive way. If somebody is, if something's being explained to them and they're goofing around, students saying, we had a practice test last week. One student was complaining, why do I need to take this practice test? And without the proctor or myself saying anything, a fellow student said, you need to take this seriously. We need to find out where you're at so they can help you. That's kind of a glimpse of when peers can talk to each other. It's more powerful coming from that student to student than if I would have said the same thing, which I actually already had, so that was part of the deal. So yeah, but it's not necessarily negative in the sense that if you're not a high scorer, that you're going to be, there's going to be doubts cast upon it. It's about growth. We're just impressed with the student who starts maybe low and never even makes it, but shows tremendous growth. We're just as proud of that student as a student who starts above the benchmark and makes some growth. It's really focused on individual growth. We would recalibrate the expectations based on where our students are from year to year. So it's not going to penalize certain students whose strengths may lay out outside the testing realm, and there's definitely people like that who don't test well per se, or that's not their strongest suit, but have other strengths. So we wouldn't, the system would take that into account.
Joel, were you done? I just want to piggyback on something like that. I had some notes about the same thing. I'm very interested to hear about how the students look at this whole thing, because again, when you get a bunch of teenagers together, they can really achieve a great many things, especially when I look at our snow program, Snowflakes, they really do kind of pull it all together. And so I would be very interested to hear, do you, and you might not have this yet, but do you anticipate some kind of a group that would be advisors for this, like students or leaders among the class, or it's just them working together? Do you see any kind of, I guess I'm kind of thinking about, like the junior high has a student leadership, right? Do you see any of that, or is this just going to be a straight across the board, they're all working together kind of thing?
We want it to be in a complete team effort, but there will be informal leadership that will be powerful. There will also be formalized leadership.
Okay,
so
great.
All of the above.
Okay,
And part of, I mean, I see some of it occurring, but it's too early to really, I mean, we're so early in the process. I can tell you, I mean, I met individually with all of the students because the board and Kevin approved the funding to do the PSAE, you know, the college readiness stuff. And so we're kicking that off tomorrow, full force. And I had to meet with all the students individually today, and they seem very motivated to be a part of it. There wasn't any grousing about it. There weren't students who wanted to opt out of it. They seemed very willing to give it a try. And there was, against that, you know, this is anecdotal evidence, but some of that talk between people about wanting to do this.
And then I just have a couple of specific questions, or just one or two, based on the handout that you gave us at the last meeting. So what we're seeing here so far is, I think, unless I'm reading this wrong, pretty fantastic. Over the past 5 years, our ACT scores have gone up on this chart that you gave us from 2008 to 2012. So are these numbers that you gave us, these 5-year trends and all that, is this the PSAE? Do you know what number?
Yes.
Okay.
So
it's looking like they're trending up, which is fantastic. And I would just have to say, any incentives that the students are part of to help us help them, help us help them, you know, is fantastic. Because when I see, you know, our ACT's gone up every year in the last 5 years, our, you know, reading, English, I mean, this is great. So I'm very excited to hear how this plays out. Because to see these numbers already moving in a good direction, to see them even proceed upwards would be great. So thank you for this information.
Thank you.
Jack, I have one more question. As far as the very small percentage of students that might not make the best choices,
Yes.
unfortunately, is there going to be a documented process that somebody in the building is going to follow if somebody has not shown up and is not where they're expected to be? And who does that potentially involve? Have you guys talked about what that might look like?
It's preliminary, but we already I mean, you know, that's the power, again, of the size of Westmont High School. Especially if we don't track that currently because it's not an issue.
Right.
But we know from day to day if somebody is truant, and we can follow up pretty quickly. Because, you know, if they're not called in the morning, if they attended and marked present for certain periods, and all of a sudden they're not there, then we pretty quickly verify with the faculty, was the student in class, and if they, you know, it's not a perfect system because, you know, but generally speaking, a faculty member will say, no, that student was not here. Or, you know, once in a while, oh, they were delayed in the media center, they were doing a special project, they came to class late and I didn't mark them present, they showed up late, so they were okay. So we usually verify that first. But under this system, we would absolutely, any kind of a fifth period absence by a senior would stand out like a red thumb, and we'd say, you know, we got to get after that right there. So
I'm just concerned about, you know, those couple of kids that might not make the right choices are definitely going to be making the wrong choices off campus now. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we have some kind of response that's predictable. So it can't be, you know, if I know that we have a very good attendance person, but the day that she takes a day off, you know, it can't fall through the cracks because the person who's normally the vigilant person happens to be absent that day. So just, you know, kind of thinking about those couple of kids that we really want to try and guide a little more than a high percentage of our students who will do the right thing. You know, how do we have a safety net that catches those couple of kids and make sure that we're...
See, I think, yeah, the follow through is pretty strong already. And most of our students are very compliant and responsible.
Right.
So it really makes it easier to focus on the small percentage that don't.
Okay.
And if we're absolutely clear with them that there's going to be pretty dire consequence, you're going to lose this really nice privilege if you abuse it. And then the key is to follow through very swiftly on that. I think, you know, inevitably somebody is probably going to make a mistake and they're going to lose the privilege. I guess part of what I'll say, though, is And there's some campuses that I might not try this at, but because of our size, because of the tremendous compliance and accountability of most of the students, I think most of them will take advantage of it in a positive way.
Is that it, Shannon? I had two thoughts. One was this, I know personally from having in a small class, sometimes when the schedules get all put together, there's invariably somebody who doesn't fall into the typical senior, typical junior track or classroom situation. What happens if their classes don't fall into that 5th period opening?
You mean, so somebody's looking for a singleton who, as an example, and they're a senior, and the only time the class is offered? Well, there's a few different ways. First of all, I think we have to be very thoughtful about the way we construct the schedule and probably keep senior singleton courses out of 5th period. As an example, traditionally band is scheduled 5th period. We couldn't do that anymore, obviously. None of the seniors would even have the option. If it was unavoidable, then maybe some seniors would have to make a decision there about whether to take the class or not. But up front, we try to be as intelligent about it as possible and structure a schedule where senior singleton classes were not offered during 5th. If we indeed went with the schedule we currently have, and it's
At least have the senior know that this is what they're giving up if they choose that option.
Yes, ahead of time.
Then the other question was, it was students who came to you with this idea, correct?
The beginning of the year, I gave them a survey too. You can see I'm into surveying people because I want to hear what they're thinking. But I said, what would be a positive incentive? And the overwhelming choice by the students was the idea of open campus lunch. And they've reiterated that throughout the last few months. So, in a way, maybe this isn't the most opportune time to say it, but it is what it is. I mean, this is not like my greatest the thing that agenda item that I would put at the top. This is not the thing I'm more excited about other issues. But I think it's potentially the one that could be the riskiest in some ways, and it obviously has to come to the board before we could have meaningful conversations anyplace else. But I think it's an accurate statement to say, that from a student perspective, that this is a very big carrot. This is something that they're very interested in, and I think there's not much question about that. And it was student initiated. I never would have thought I would be asking for open campus.
The reason I'm asking is I'm wondering what their definition of open campus is. Are we making it a bigger thing, or is it to them a bigger thing?
I think we have to define it at the end of the day and what it looks like. But when I've discussed it with people and our students as an example, going from not having any open campus to having, let's say 2 or 1 day a week is a pretty significant change. That's, 35 times during the year where they're going to get a privilege they haven't had previously. So, yeah, the idea, I really think we should start small, especially the more I listen to people. And I think, we all know there's some risk here. There's no question. But I think if we limit it, we limit the risk at some level. And we can better monitor it if it's once a week versus 5, obviously. The smaller the number of days, the easier it is to monitor.
Okay.
So a couple things. Your history with implementing this in other places?
I've worked, the last 3 high schools I've worked with did not have open campus on a regular basis like this. A high school that I work with in Iowa did have open campus. And once again, it was a different campus than Westmont. It was a larger high school. Just to be blunt about it, the students weren't as respectful or as accountable to the things they needed to meet. And there were majority of students who were responsible and a small percentage that were abused the privilege. So that's my personal history. Okay. And I won't, I have to represent it as I know it. The trend is to close campuses, not to open them. There's no question about that.
And your quick thoughts, 1 day defined by us, so it's on Tuesdays or something, is that?
Absolutely. I think
so
we should,
it wouldn't be floating to a student?
No.
Okay. The benchmarks you've identified, you said 3. The passing rate I get. The second one is PSAE as opposed to ACT. And, this may not be the meeting where we talk about test scores may be the one where we talk about this, but especially last year, it looked like there was a wide divergence between what happened with the ACT scores for some reason and what happened with the PSAEs, which did particularly badly and particularly poorly for whatever reason. So understanding what that score benchmark is, what that PSA, if it's the PSAE, we should understand why the PSAEs didn't do so well, in particular last year. The other, so, I don't know if you want to shed any light on that, or if Kevin, if you'd prefer to talk about that at another time.
Yeah, we'll probably, and I was going to reference this in the superintendent's report. As Jack alluded to, tomorrow is the actual date that report card information is released. And so while we have our test scores, those other, some of those other items we don't have, and the ability to make comparisons to our neighbors and so forth. So typically in October, we do a presentation on report card data. We're actually going to do that in November, because then we'll have, again, that comparative data. So we can probably address some of that with that presentation.
AP targets is the third benchmark. How does that, so how does that work? Because obviously, if a student's prepared or ready to do an AP course, that's great. But, how do you do the aggregate, sort of, okay, this year, 20 kids took an AP course or 30 kids took an AP course. Is that an escalating target, or is that just a target where you say you want to grow from 20 kids to 40 kids over the course of the next 3 years? How does that work? Just theoretically for you.
Yes. Well, partly that metric is still under construction.
Okay.
It would definitely involve having a higher percentage of students exposed to the rigor of advanced placement. It also would include students being involved in senior project or some other innovative programs too. It's easier to discuss AP because that's known, but we want to also encourage students taking some chances on some of the things we've talked about in the Small Giant Initiative, and we have some of that that's under work by our faculty. But and this is another prolonged conversation that, as I say, we're still in the middle of. But the idea is, my personal belief, when I look at the data, when I compare it to other schools in our area, I think this is an area where we could step up and improve and expose a higher percentage of our students to more rigorous classes. A lot of that, and I'm not talking necessarily about the results they get on test scores. I'm talking about their willingness to engage and give the effort to maybe take on a more rigorous curriculum. So part of the metric would include getting students exposure, encouraging that. But that's part of a longer process where we would expose them to the research that talks about the benefits of taking the most rigorous course possible. Exposing them to the research that talks about, even if you don't necessarily pass the AP test, there could be benefits for what you do when you graduate from Westmont High School. Just being exposed to that. And this is a prolonged conversation with the research and all the arguments for. And then once again, calibrating it to the needs of individual students. So there may be some students who don't take any classes, and that's understandable. They may go to TCD because that's where their strength is, and I think that's a great option we have here in Westmont. So they may not be on the AP course. But I think any student who's serious about being in college should at least be exposed to one college level class before they're sitting in an auditorium with 400 students and being lectured at. They should what's the difference between, February of their senior year and August or September of their freshman year of college? I think they're better prepared if they've already been exposed to it during the high school level. So it will be, in some students, we may open the door to them, and they may say for good reasons, we don't want to be a part of this. I really think my future lies in, some other kind of coursework, and we would understand that.
So, because that's the part that feels like, to the extent that we grow participation in AP, then the larger burden of rigor is placed on a smaller universe or a subset of the class. So at a certain level, at a real level, I'm very bought into the argument about more kids taking AP courses with the rigor that's required at that. what that raises for me is this notion of individual incentive and sort of individual targets for kids, versus kids who, maybe they're not even TCDs. They're just kids who, are going to take regular courses as opposed to honors and AP courses. And the question becomes, do we institute for them, if they're not AP, do we talk about GPA targets for those kids? Do we talk about other targets for those kids? But just so that the notion of rigor, if we're going to pass it on to some, should we pass it on to all, or is there a way to construct it so that we can pass it on to all? But then that gets into the trickier question of, if there's individual targets, then should this be an individual incentive for kids to buy into, or should it be a collective? Which, I guess, becomes the next question. Let's assume, and let's go with the notion of a collective incentive. We set targets. We say 70% at PSAE meet and exceeds. It comes in at 65. Or first year it comes in at 70 or 69 or something. Yahoo, that's great, and so we buy in. The next year, it dips to 62. Or like last year, 54, whatever the number is. What happens to the morale of the kids in that class when they don't have the right to go off campus for lunch on a longitudinal basis after they've been watching their other friends and colleagues who are a year older or 2 years older do that kind of thing? I mean, and so how do you deal with that? And that's just a gut question that, to be candid, I don't know if I expect an answer. I would love to hear an observation or two, but I know it's something you got to flesh out.
I have a little experience with that, and here's what I'll say. I think the intelligent thing to do is, in a thoughtful way, calibrate the goals so they are attainable, but it's based on student effort. So you can pretty much, by looking at students' long-term growth and scores, you have a pretty good indication if students give maximum effort of where they're going to land as a class. And this is, I mean, I've been doing that for 20 years, so I can get a good sense of if students are coming in with these Explore scores, these Plan scores, I know right away, if we don't get a test score increase this year, then we didn't do our job, and, or the students completely tanked. So we'd have to maybe make minor calibrations. Now, so we would do that, so it always really was rested upon the students' willingness to put forth an excellent effort. Now, and if they did that, it would result in what we had hoped for. The downside to that, as you say, if the majority of students don't put forth an excellent effort, then maybe they didn't earn the incentive as a class. And I'm okay with that. And I think, I don't want that to happen, obviously. What we want to do is build a culture where the expectation is you're going to be to class on time, you're going to have good attendance, you're going to give a good effort, and we're going to be proud of you as long as you give a good effort. If you're slacking, then we're going to need to push you a little bit. And there's consequences to that. Yeah. So there is, of course, once again, a real risk that you could have one class that had a large group of students that maybe didn't put forth their best effort and didn't hit the goal. I really, you asked for my observation, and I'll close it out quickly. I believe when you build a culture of high expectations, that students want to be a part of that. When it can build on itself, and that most students will comply. Most students will reach that. You may have a few exceptions, but when you have what I think we have at Westmont High School, which is a very nurturing environment, and we step up the expectations, and students know we deeply care about them, that most people will respond. Enough people will respond so you hit the target.
I get it. And I think you touched the point, which is and you got a number back here, 40 of the, there's, of the tardies, there's 40 kids who represent a lot of tardies. So as you're building and calibrating those targets, clearly at some level you have to incentivize them, but then that becomes very definitely something that, how do you do that and not penalize the rest of the kids who are playing fair if there's just some kids who just aren't bought in. So and leave that to you guys. Administered by, is that, because you mentioned
we'll have a really good idea about 95% graduation rate in the summer, because we'll know credit standings, right? We'll have a good idea about what the PSAEs look like, because those are released to school districts in the summer as well. We'll obviously have enrollment for classes sort of known by August as well. So administratively, I guess the question I'll ask, and again, the answer not required tonight, but something I'd like to think about is this something that just the administration, sort of says, yes, we've met a goal, or if you're off by 1% on PSAE, we're okay to waive that? Or is that something where it basically comes to the board in August or in July, and you guys lay out, hey, look, here's where we set the targets, here's where they came in, and do you want to buy into the incentive?
Yeah, I like that to be a collective decision at some point. Of course, we might make an argument for something, but once again, as you say, if it's 69% and we take a look at all the factors and many kids were close, and we take a look at the trend data and this is an amazing increase, then maybe it's worth keeping the incentive.
At its core, I love the idea, I love the incentive idea, and I do like the collective. I lean still towards the individual, that we set goals for individuals, each individual to excel. And my biggest concern with it, though, as a collective, is that it becomes part of the expectation of seniors as they arrive their junior year, having taken their test, having taken their classes, having gotten whatever that is, but it's just an expectation, because incentives work well for a while generally, but then their effectiveness tends to fall off. So I am concerned about that notion, that it becomes less of an incentive over time and more of an expectation. Mm-hmm. So just something to consider for me. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add one thing? Just hearing this, it's, some of us have been in the parent business for a long time, and we see our children progress from elementary, junior high, high school. And the one thing that it dawned on me just here tonight is thinking about, those of us that have sent children off to college. It's a very trying time. And so we take them from, completely in our homes in that. First of all, they're going to go out driving. So that's in and of itself, they're out there driving, okay? So the one thing that I liked about this was us talking to these students who are seniors, is talking to them about, this is about you. This is about your career, your future, and we're willing to have an intelligent conversation with you about this. And it's not just about getting a grade or completing a course or 9 to 5, but what happens when you do what you're supposed to is you get some incentives, because that next year these kids are going off to college, many of them, or careers or military or whatever. So the thing that I like about it is here's a little taste of what you're going to see next year, because for those kids that do go off to college, no one's going to be waking them up when they're running late, or no one's going to be checking their attendance every class. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that at the high school level. I absolutely agree with all of that, attendance, everything that is currently in place. The one thing I like about it is that next step, that you guys are 1 year away, see your senior year. That's our last time with our kids and our students to kind of, okay, here's what's coming. So having had children kind of go through that, I am excited to see what would come of this. Because again, I think we have to monitor the individual as well as the collective student body. I do like how we're hearing that those will be looked at on a year-to-year basis. Because we all know with some of the small classes, 1 or 2 kids can change the whole dynamics or something like that. But I just wanted to kind of comment on that to me it seems like a nice stepping stone. And I don't mean just nice, but it's almost like a growth. So I do look forward to hearing some more information as we go forward.
Great.
Do you need anything from us tonight? You just need consensus to continue? Or have you heard that? Or what are we looking at?
Yeah, well, I think overall, I think there is support with the idea, but it has to be fleshed out more. And,
yeah.
Jack can work on that with the high school staff.
Yeah, I didn't want to just presume that this, and there's some concerns that have been brought up. So we'll try to address those through the process, and then, I believe, address those concerns, work with the faculty, work with parents, work with students, and then bring you a next level proposal that you may have questions, concerns about. We tweak it, go back and forth, and then eventually, I'm assuming it would come to some kind of a vote. So, but the first stage was at least seeing if we could even take the next step or not. I didn't want to just presume.
Right.
And Kevin, you haven't obviously raised any objections at this point, so it sounds like you're okay with continuing the conversation at this point.
Definitely, I'd like to, as some people have expressed some concerns, and I share some of those concerns, but, I'm also confident that, Jack is going to work with the staff. He'll take a look at all the concerns that have been brought forward, and he'll put together a plan that I think we'll be able to approve and live with.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for.
Thank you
very much. This is, looking forward to this further. Okay, the next item, superintendent's report.
My report is brief this evening. We did have a joint committee meeting on October 16th, in which we brought our 4 district committees together. The Finance Committee continued their work on developing ways to educate the community on the basics of school finance, and they're actually working on a School Finance 101 document that would be available on our website. Our Facility Committee, Steve Cashman was invited, and Steve Cashman is our architect. And again, he kind of discussed the previous committee's work and the mid-range, long-range plans for the district, and kind of gave the community an idea of what that meant for each of the buildings. The additional information that the committee now is looking for is they would like some input from the building principals as how do they see their buildings and the priorities within their buildings, and then also as possibly the officers from our various parent groups could also be in attendance so that they could provide feedback as well. And then obviously the other concern is funding and how much projects will cost and what are some funding options. And so we're working on providing that information to our Facility Committee. Climate Committee, again, they're very focused on November 12th through the 16th is bullying awareness. And so they have many activities planned for that week. And then the other concern or reality is that they want to make sure that it's just not a snapshot 1 week event, but rather this topic is revisited throughout the year because it is a concern for schools. And they're also reviewing character education programs. They're continuing that work. Strategic planning, they looked at SMART goals and did a little in-servicing with regards to SMART goals because, again, the next phase of our strategic plan, we have our strategic plan. Now we want to make sure that it's implemented with integrity and that we have various metrics as we measure that implementation. The next meeting is currently scheduled for November 20th at 6:30 p.m. October 30th is our next negotiation date, and I'm optimistic that will be successful. But that is also a tentative date, so depending upon the outcome of October 30th, we may have to look at the November 20th date and move it so that we can accommodate the negotiations.
Okay. The next item, board reports. I have something here. Following the spectacular jazz cafe at the high school a couple weeks ago, I did talk to Mr. Jesse, and I wanted to highlight the upcoming fall play, and this will be the Neil Simon's The Odd Couple. It will be November 10th, 11th, and 12th. And the unusual twist on this play is that it will be presented in 2 ways. The traditional cast with the roles of Oscar and Felix, and also the female version with Olive and Florence. And Mr. Jesse gave me some information that Neil Simon wrote the play in the 1980s after getting requests from actresses who wanted to play these iconic male roles. So the nice thing about it is that more of our student body is able to participate in this fall play. So just wanted to state that the tickets are going on sale beginning October 29th, and you can call the high school to reserve your tickets. Again, it's November 9th, 10th, and 11th, and so there will be 2 showings for the male cast and 2 showing for the female cast. So this seems something a little different, and looking forward to that. So, any other board reports?
Yeah, Kevin, I noticed on the district website that the anti-bullying T-shirt designs are up there. Is that just generally open, and do people know that they're there, or can you talk a little bit about that, or do you know much about that, or?
I believe there is a contest, and I think it's been communicated. And at this juncture, I think it's a student contest.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I know it's on the district website, and you can view all the T-shirts made by the different, or the designs by the different students. And I don't know if it really stipulates whether it's just for students, but I think parents are chiming in as well. There's a couple of really interesting designs there, so I hope everyone takes an opportunity to go to the district website, click on the link, see the designs. I know there has been some talk about some of them maybe even being made into like a poster or banners for the different buildings, because there's, I know there's one there in particular that's very intricate. So, and just a very interesting design, so, and some good slogans. So I think the voting is going just by an email, sending an email to Amanda James on what your selection is. And so I hope as many people participate in that as possible.
Thanks.
Joel, can I ask a question? Did I hear that adults could purchase a T-shirt as well?
You know, I don't know, I would think so, but I haven't gotten all of those details. We had some emails going back and forth between the members of the Climate Committee to possibly have a separate meeting or outside of the regular, just to kind of finalize a few things like that. So I would bring that up at that point.
Okay, great.
I wanted to extend a congratulations to the girls and boys cross-country teams. I know they did really well at regionals. The boys got 2nd and the girls got 6th. They're going on to sectionals next week in Lisle. That's a great job for our high school. Also, in conjunction with what Laura said about her blog for the CAC, I also recommend a subscription to the PLC, CUSD 201 PLC.
And then Friday night was senior night at a football game. Congratulations to all our seniors. There's so many of them, and I was tempted to read them off, but I know I'm going to miss some, so I can't do that. But sincerest congratulations. But I did also want to mention that Wednesday evening, prior to that, was the Volley for the Cure. It was the girls' volleyball last home game, and man, they were playing Coal City for the conference championship, and unfortunately came up a couple points short. Talk about 3 exciting games. You know, the last 2 games were both 25-23. And, you know, we were victimized by a couple calls in that last game. And I appreciated Jack going up to the super fans and helping them with their chants during that period of time. I think the chant was Malarkey or something like that. So it was, but what an exciting night. What an exciting set of girls, and an exciting, you know, just sort of student body that, you know, and a special congratulations. I will mention 2. Special congratulations to Susie and to Molly. I won't say their last names.
Okay, are there any other board reports? Okay, then, are there any other public comments? Okay. The next school board meeting, well, the superintendent coffee is October 25th at 7 o'clock at the Westmont High School Commons. And the next school board meeting is November 13th, 7 o'clock here at the Village Hall. The chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining, personnel, potential litigation, and student discipline.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caparelli?
Yes.
Charleston?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, and there will not be a vote after closed.